પણ અંદાજે છે ને શહેરમાં જઈએ છીએ સરસ મજાની ફિલ્મ જોવા.
તમને ફિલ્મ પસંદ પણ નથી.
આ વખતે જરા નોખું છે.
મારે છે ને ફિલ્મ બનવું છે.
તારા બાપને જેમાં પણ રહેવું છે ત્યાં જલ્દી ફટાફટ કામે લાગ.
તમે લોકો રોજ આવું હારું હારું ખાવાનું ખાઓ ઘરે?
તમારે ખાવી છે?
હાલ મારી યારે. અને અહીંયા બેસીને ફિલ્મ જો. અહીંયા રીલ જે ફિલ્મ રીલ છે એ લોકોની ચોરી થતી હોય છે. તમે લોકો ચોર છો ને?
વામણની નાત વચ્ચે નાક કપાવું છે મારું.
શું બામણ કરો છો? ચા અને તમારી હાલાત તો જુઓ.
અરે ખરેખર ફિલ્મ બનાવી છે?
મારે પ્રકાશ ભણવું છે. પ્રકાશમાંથી વાર્તા બને અને વાર્તામાં ફિલ્મ.
મોહબ્બત ફિર ભી મંઝિલ પાએગી.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Pond from TheWrap, and I am delighted to welcome the director, Nalin, producer, Dheer Momaya, and the star of the movie, Bhavin Rabari. I think we're a little short on microphones, but we can share. So welcome and thank you for, thank you for just a lovely, touching film.
Thank you so much.
When we start, I want to tell a story that we were talking about in the lobby when we met, which was a few weeks ago at the Academy's Governor's Awards. And I was in the lobby beforehand talking to an Academy member who's also a publicist on this film, and Gabriel LaBelle, who was the star of The Fabelmans, which is Steven Spielberg's movie that, if you don't know, is about a young boy who just sees movies early in his life and decides he has to be a director. And his name isn't Samay, but it's Sammy. So you were giving Gabriel a rundown of the similarities between your movie and his movie, and Gabe was pretty amazed.
Yeah, we were both amazed when me and we went to see the movie with the whole cast and crew. And when the movie started, we just, like, at least 30 times we looked at each other, how is that possible? How is that possible? So Samay and the obsession with train, if you remember the great scene with the train, and then Sammy has friend, 5 friends, like Samay has 5 friends, and the mother who is supporting and father who is against, and then we just started looking at many similarities, and it was just quite amazing. That how we all filmmakers think alike. I mean, to talk about my own story, some 25 years ago when I saw first time Cinema Paradiso, I thought, how could they have, at least there were 3 scenes which were straight out of my life. I said, I live far away in a remote part of India. How can this Italian director know my friendship about projectionist?
Yeah. So, but you were actually working on this long before Steven Spielberg started working on The Fabelmans, right?
Well, I wouldn't know when he started, but I started definitely a long time ago because I started, I think, in around 2011. I used to visit my parents. They live in the same region where I shot and where I shot the movie. So they told me I should go and meet my childhood friend. His name was Mohammed, who was a projectionist and my friend and kind of second teacher because he was going through rough time. And so when I met him, we sort of sat by the street and started, drinking chai, tea, and he said, "It's terrible time. I've been fired. I can no longer work in the cinema hall because I don't know how to read and download DCPs on computer, and everywhere the digital projection system is coming across India. And not only he, but many of his colleagues have been fired from the job. And he was the first one to tell me that now projectors are turning into spoon and plates, and the film is becoming bracelets. And so that the same evening, my family, we started talking like we used to talk earlier, that we are not surprised why you are a filmmaker, because when you were a kid, you had ended up in remand home, juvenile home for stealing film reels, and you used to collect so much of junk and matchboxes and color. So those stories sort of were floating around for many years in the family. But in order to come to the city, I took a bus ride. And that bus had a wedding party, Indian wedding party, and there was a 5-hour-long bus ride, and all the women were wearing bangles, and I had nothing to do for 5 hours, so I just started looking at bangle, and what I heard from my friend, I said, maybe these women don't know, they could be wearing some of the superstar on their hand, or maybe it's Antonioni, or maybe it's a print, and then very soon I realized there was also color palette, which started resembling certain movies of Jean-Luc Godard, like the cinematographer often prepare color palette, I said like, oh, okay, black and white, gray. And I went and wrote that scene, and that was kind of an essence of the first idea of Last Film Show. It took me many years to find money, till Dheer came on board and believed in my story, and say, let's go to Cannes market to look for money. And we went there in 2019 to search for finance. Yeah.
Well, Dheer, why don't you pick up the story from your point of view? How did you get involved, and what was that like?
Right, yeah. I think for me, watching Nalin's earlier movies really shaped my understanding of modern Indian cinema. Because we're used to watching a certain type of cinema in India which has extravagant song and dance, and which is slightly over the top in its storytelling, and not to say that that's not great, but I'd seen enough of that, and I was really looking for something which was indigenous, which was local, which was something that I could relate to, but still had a global quality to it. So when I watched Nalin's earlier movies, specifically Samsara, Valley of Flowers, and Angry Indian Goddesses, I was blown away, and I somehow realized, there's sometimes when you watch something and you're like, I need to meet the person who made that. Like, there's something that I need to gain from that person, or there's something that that person can gain from me. Just a thought that, germinates in your mind. And I did, and I moved mountains to try and meet Nalin, and when I got to meet him, the first question I asked him, I was like, how, man? How have you made that movie and that movie? Where do you come from? Your name is Pan Nalin, and just give me the backstory. And over a few meetings, he did give me the backstory, and that's essentially the story that you see here, that where he told me about the countryside that he grew up in, and the relationship that he had with his mother and his father. And there was this deep emotional texture, that I felt about his backstory, which I felt very moved by. So I remember I called him a couple of days later, and I was like, Nalin, can I get your life rights to your story? And I want to make a movie about it. I think it would make a great movie. And he was like, nah, I don't, let's see, maybe one day. I'm not really interested in doing that right now. I've spent most of my life trying to get away from, my childhood. I don't want to go back and live with it for that many years. So I let it go. And then, I think the whole streaming wave that hit the world, and the shutting down of cinemas, and the general move that people had, moving away from the cinematic communal experience, I think it sort of pushed him to develop it further and give it a little more weight in his own head. And then a few years later, when he called me and he said, "Hey, I have a movie that I want to make, and you might be interested in wanting to make it with me." And I was like, "Listen, you don't even need to tell me what the film is about. I'm always in." But when he did, and I did read the story, I was like, I have to, and I foresaw it, so it was quite nice.
Well, Bhavin, we need to know your story. How did you get involved in this movie?
Bhavin, તને પૂછે છે, sorry, I have to interpret for him. તને પૂછે છે કે તને આ ફિલ્મમાં કેમ ચાન્સ મળ્યો, કેવી રીતે તું આવી ગયો?
તારું સ્ટોરી શું છે?
તારી વાર્તા તું
જબ
ક્યાંથી આવે છે એ પણ કહેજે.
થોડુંક ઇંગ્લિશ પણ ચાલશે.
હા, ચાલશે, ઇંગ્લિશ ટ્રાય કર.
I'm from India and my I'm Gujarat and my small village is Vasai is district Jamnagar and चांस ऐसे मिला क्योंकि जब સ્કૂલ જ્યારે હું 5મા ધોરણમાં ભણતો હતો અને સ્કૂલમાં હતો તો ત્યારે સરે બધા આમ સિલેક્શન જેકી રામચંદ્રની અને નયનભાઈને બધા આવ્યા હતા તો મને હું આઈ એમ બેક બેન્ચર एंड मैं पीछे बैठा था तो ऐसा मेरे को पूछा कि सबसे क्लास में सबसे शरारती लड़का कौन है, तो मैंने हाथ खड़ा किया कि सबसे शरारती लड़का पूरे क्लास में मैं हूँ। तो ऐसा हाथ उठा क्या, फिर उन्होंने मेरे को पूछा कि तुम्हारा फेवरेट हीरो कौन है, तो मैंने बोला कि अमिताभ बच्चन जी। और फिर उन्होंने बोला कि चलो 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 चलो, फिर मेरे को वो हो गया। फिर मेरे को उधर ऊपर ले गए और थोड़े के एक्टिंग करवाए, मतलब कि प्राणी की आवाज़, फिर ऐसे अनोने आवाज़ निकलवाए, तो मैंने वो सब आवाज़ निकलवा दिए। फिर घर पर ऐसा सबको था कि
He's a big storyteller. I'm not a professional interpreter, sorry. But I've heard his story. Anyway, so he's coming from a Vasai village, which is in the same region in northwest of India. It's a small village, and as he said, he is a backbencher in his class. And one of our casting director had arrived at his school looking for naughty students, or naughty kids. And he raised his hand, and so he was taken onto the terrace of the school and asked, okay, have you seen any film? He had seen very few, and if you have seen, who is your favorite actor? So he said, Amitabh Bachchan, the Indian superstar. So then they asked him that, can you do some animal, voices? What animal can you act it out? So he tried to act out couple of animal. kaya प्राणियों का?
बंदर, फिर donkey.
अच्छा, okay. So he did donkey and monkey and and then the subject went within the house to discuss with the family whether can he act.
પછી બધા घर पर कोई राजी नहीं थे कि चने आने बेचो। तब हमारे उधर ऐसा चल रहा था कि बच्चों को उठा जाएंगे और फिर बच्चों को किडनैप कर जाएंगे। तो घर पर कोई राजी नहीं था। फिर मैंने लास्ट बार पापा को फ़ोन किया कि पापा घर पर सब ना बोल रहे, मैं जाऊं या ना जाऊं। तो पापा ने बोला चल जा, कोई बात नहीं। फिर घर पर सब बोलने लगे कि क्यों जाने देना। तो मेरे पापा ने कहा कि मेरे 2 बच्चे, एक चला गया तो कोई बात नहीं, मेरे पर भरोसा करके मेरे को छोड़ा।
Okay. So then the topic went to his house and he discussed with his parents that I want to, they were asking me to be in the movie, and everyone was against it. His father was not at his home. Mother said, no way. Little bit like in the film, there's still this reputation, so I'm sure that was the reason they said no way. Then his father called and he says, look, I need to be in this movie. So he spoke with his mother and the family and said, let him go. We have 2 kids, and they were scared that the film people will kidnap and these boys will never come back. So there is this fear that the children will be kidnapped and they will not return, and that's a true fear as well. So the father told mother that, okay, we have 2 kids, doesn't matter if they take away one.
But they trusted him. He said they bharosa rakha hai.
But then they still trusted him. And I just want to add that this also happened during our casting. One of our casting director was literally beaten nearly to death by the villagers because they thought he had come to kidnap kids, you know. And luckily one teacher was passing by and said like, no, we know this guy he's doing movie casting. So in the smaller villages, you know, whenever there's an outsider, they are not really convinced.
फिर वो मैं तब ऑडिशन देने चला गया. फिर नलिन सर तब थे, वो सब ऐसे अनोने प्रश्न पूछ रहे थे कि जब ऐसा मतलब कि अनोने प्रश्न पूछ रहे थे जिसका आपको जवाब आपके अंदर से देना पड़ता होगा. बोलो.
So then he met me and I asked him question, and the toughest thing for him, because I told him that he has to give answer to everything I asked from inside, not from outside, and he didn't understand what that meant.
और फिर उधर 11 दिन का था और मैं सिलेक्ट हो गया और मेरे को पता है नहीं, घर पर किसी को पता है नहीं, मेरे को सिर्फ ऐसे ही वापस घर पर भेज दिया. फिर 2-3 वीक के बाद पापा को फ़ोन आया कि आपका बच्चा सिलेक्ट हो गया है और आप वीक बनाने के लिए उधर बॉम्बे आ जाओ.
So so anyway, we'll cut this. So basically there was a workshop where, you know, we had to select who is going to play the lead role. And once he was selected, we didn't tell him. He said he was not informed, and he was sent back to his house. And about 2 weeks later, production called and say, okay, no, he's going to be playing the lead role, and we need to take him to Mumbai and maybe do some work with his hair and the wig.
और फिर ऐसे ही मैं सिलेक्ट हो गया.
And this is how he ended up in last film show. I just want to add one thing. You know, he ended up on condition that he has 2 cows and a buffalo, and that every day he has to make a WhatsApp call, video call. Otherwise, they will not eat. You know, so he tells them, "Lila, now you eat. I'm going to the shoot," and then they. We are doing that here as well. You know.
So, did you ever think about being in the movie? Did you want to be in the movie?
એમ સાહેબ પૂછે તારે કોઈ દિવસ પિક્ચરમાં કામ કરવું હતું તે એવું વિચાર્યું હતું કે હું ફિલ્મમાં કામ કરું?
ના, મને આમ ફિલ્મમાં થોડોક જ રસ હતો, પણ મને વધારે પડતો ક્રિકેટમાં રસ હતો.
He said, no, I was not interested in cinema, very little. I was only interested in playing cricket. He had rarely been to cinema, only once when we met him. Yeah, that's what his parents told us.
So as a director, how do you work with all of these young actors? Because you get such wonderful performances out of, you know, a big cast of inexperienced actors.
Yeah, I mean, we started earlier looking for professional actor, but we did about 3,000 auditions before we found him, and twice I abandoned to make this movie because I said I just cannot work with professional child actor because they are heavily influenced by popular Indian cinema, the TV reality show. So their idea of acting was just so depressing for me. And so with my casting director, Dilip Shankar, who had earlier worked with Ang Lee to find Suraj Sharma for Life of Pi. And so we changed the strategy. We said, let's go to the places where kids rarely go to see films. And when we met him, I knew there was something about Bhavin. So what I did was I just took shot only of his eyes, about 30-40 shots. And I told him extreme close-up and say, okay, fearful, excited, happy, sad, you're missing your mother, you are hungry. You know, and I just kept filming his eyes, and then we came back to the production base. We put those footage together of 40 shots, and me and my editor projected it, you know, we had a projector set up there. And it was about 50-second run, and we both had goosebump and wet eyes. And there was no screenplay, there was no dialogue. There was something happening with this extreme close-up of his eyes. And I said, like, this is the guy, you know, even though he's a non-actor, we are going with him, you know, because the way he understood everything I wanted to do, you know, was really easy. The biggest challenge was how do you make him comfortable in front of 150 camera crew. Those lenses, we worked with old Hawk and, Lomo lenses, which were movie lenses. So to do close-up, it's sometimes, you know, in your face. the boom. So we did a workshop where just to make him comfortable, and the workshop was titled How Not to Act Workshop.
Dear, for you, were there moments for you when you felt the same thing, like, I don't know how we're going to make this movie?
Oh, yeah. I think there were quite a few moments. The casting was perhaps the most challenging because, the other things there were still, when other problems hit, essentially the process of making a movie is just really problem solving. So that's why I always say in India, hire engineers on your line production team because that's the only way you're going to get something made. Frugal innovation, But I think the casting was, a few times that I felt that really would we ever be able to make this movie. But along with that, there were things like finding the working 35mm projectors and that much film, because the way Nalin had written it, it was very nourished and expansive. It almost, it's filmed like an epic, right? It's not meant to be like it's not a typical coming of age story in that sense. So the extensive requirement of locations and specific, things in the production design which didn't exist anymore. And simultaneously, we were also battling against time because all the things that you see in the film, all the locations, they were disappearing slowly. Quite quickly, because the cinema hall that we shot in, there was, while we were wrecking and we were looking at it, there was already, it was already decided to be torn down and made into a mall in that small town. And the train that we shot in, which is the narrow gauge line, was becoming the broad gauge line, and the whole charming sort of nature of this frozen in time place was rapidly changing, maybe for the better, but for us, from a cinematic perspective, it was important to have those in there. However, I do think that, because this story is so close to Nalin, he's also the production designer on the film, he had so much of it in his own mind that it was sort of a process to find those perfect, the representations of it. But, really, I followed him blindly into it, and I feel like, we ended up going down the right road. Thank you.
So how close is this story? I know it's semi-autobiographical. How semi? How close is this to your childhood?
I think it's a mix of my story and my childhood friend Mohammed Bhai. So especially I would say so-called the third act or the climax is a lot inspired from his story, what he lived as a projectionist and what he went through and what I saw and what I heard, the whole transformation. But as far as the earlier part is concerned, it's more or less all the collection of anecdotes from my family, what I did as a kid. So the moment you see all the glass, playing with glass and the matchboxes, I didn't even know what cinema was when I started playing with matchboxes, because Indian matchboxes have a lot of images, and we used to line them up like a storyboard and make up stories, and then mix them up like a playing card, and then other kids will get his turn, and he will make up another story using the same images. So a bit of drawing and painting I used to do, and folk drama, till I saw my first movie when I was about 8.5. And that was again a very religious film. My father had a tea stall till 2010. He refused to do any other work. He stayed there, my sisters, everyone lives there. And we ended up shooting almost in all the locations where I grew up. And as a kid, it was an obsession. We used to take 1-hour train ride to school. And I started swapping my lunchbox with this gentleman called Mohammed Bhai. Unlike Bhavin, I didn't like schools at all. So, for me, it was great to go and sacrifice my lunch to watch free movies. But I was also given another job later on by the manager. He didn't really throw me out. When he caught me that I was watching movie, he said, okay, I have a job for you. You can't be a freeloader like that, So in the cinema hall, it's very old cinema hall, and in the false ceiling, there were just at least dozens of pigeons had made home. And every time the Indian action movies will play, the pigeons are going to fly all over the place. So he said, you get your bunch of kids and you go in the rafters and catch pigeons and you can watch movies free. I said, this is great, done deal. So for many months, we were catching pigeons and watching free movies. So there were stories like that. And ultimately, we did discover that all my life, I had seen film print going in front of my eyes on my railway station in the parcel room, and we never knew there were movies inside. So when we discovered it was an attack on those boxes, and we will run into Peanuts Field and open up reels exactly like we did, and we didn't know that we are causing trouble in neighboring town hall where the reels are missing, till the cops showed up and complaints started coming, and we didn't know the seriousness of that crime, especially in India where people are so passionate and they always go to see movie 4 times, 5 times, so they will know what's missing. So yeah, all that part, and then ultimately, I think it's pretty much in everywhere you go in India, the what we call jugaad spirit, which is kind of a hack job. That when you, like our tagline, when you have nothing, nothing stops you. So as a kid, what I really liked, that we were never scared of being judged. We had no fear. It doesn't matter if we failed. So we collected junk and start to make those things, that there has to be something about light. Because my first fascination was not the story, was light. And I said that it has to be something to do with light. So first thing was, in the house, all the mirrors had gone missing for many weeks. And, the sisters who love doing makeup, they just don't understand how much money they have to spend to keep buying mirror. So all these naughty adventures were there. And we actually did make a projector, not as elaborate as this one, but there used to be toys, I'm sure many of you might have seen, which, there was like a 30-second spool for kids, and so what Mohammed Bhai had explained to me about the shutter, and that was the only missing link in our adventure. So when he told us that the shutter is the magic, and we just stole one fan from railway, and we managed to really find that shutter speed and make our projection system. Yeah, so those parts were really, and of course my mother was great cook, and so the food.
All of it is real.
So
all of it is real.
So I had to call my brother to cook all the food. So he made all the food in the film.
So, Bhavin, what was your favorite part of making this movie? What was most fun for you?
તને સૌથી શું ગમે આ ફિલ્મમાં અને કયો ભાગ હતો તેમાં સૌથી મજા તને પડી શૂટિંગ અને બનાવવામાં?
મને સૌથી વધારે એક એવો રોલ ગમ્યો તો જ્યારે રેલવે ટ્રેક ઉપર જે ઓલી ગાડી લઈને ભાગવાનું હતું ને એ ખૂબ જ મજા આવી ગઈ.
His favorite scene is when he had to steal the railway trolley, break the lock and go and run on the track. That's his favorite scene.
અને માય ફેવરેટ ગમ્યું જેમાં નાચવાનું હતું ને.
And in the movie, the scene he loves the most is where he and Fazal dance, dance to the Bollywood music.
Okay. And what was the hardest part for you?
અને સૌથી વધારે મુશ્કેલ શું હતું? મુશ્કેલ સીન કયો હતો તારા માટે?
જ્યારે જે ફેક્ટરીમાં જવાનું હતું ને ત્યાં ખૂબ જ ગરમી, મતલબ એમ ભલભલું પીગળી જાય, એમાં પાછું વીક પેજન કામ કરવા એટલે.
Factory scene, because we shot in a real factory, and he said it was so hot he thought he will melt, and plus he had hair extension and the wig extension, so it was really, really hot. And I know it was one of the toughest scene for the entire crew, even though we prepared it quite a lot, because we shot in a real factory, so there were a lot of safety issues. But that is obviously, I think we saw that he was suffering.
Yeah. We're at a time when, this isn't the only film that's sort of about the glory of going to see a film projected on a big screen, in a room full of other people. I mean, there's The Fabelmans, but there's also, there are scenes like that in Babylon. There are scenes like that in Empire of Light. What's in the air right now? Why do you think, I'll ask both of you.
We were the first one, no, anyway. For us, it started, as I told you, how my story started. But as we sort of read and see this movie, I could understand, because we all were locked during the pandemic, I think at least those 18 months, the first 4 months. And as a filmmaker, I think a lot of debate was already in the air because of streamer. So people were talking in 16, 17, what's going to happen to cinema hall? Many distributors were going away because most of my films are very independent, and I dealt with distributors from many countries, from Europe to Asia, and I know they were shutting shop, and because streaming was hitting them very hard. So the filmmakers were thinking, and then came pandemic. So I guess during this COVID-19 situation, people had a lot of time to kind of introspect and say, like, why did we go, why am I making movie? What was the reason? When did I fell in love with cinema? And somewhere we all started looking for story. And that's what I gather from when other directors talk about that why did they make Fabelmans or Empire of Light. I guess it's love. For some people, it's just going back and paying tribute to cinema or trying to find that movie-going experience again. Even though it was only 10 years ago, it wasn't really, celluloid was, the industry was pretty much alive. That's my thing, that there's a nostalgia, but same time we want to embrace the change which is coming. And thinking that, okay, this could be an end of an era for sure, even though we embrace the change. So why not celebrate? As soon as the COVID gets over, let's make movies about movies,
Yeah, I think similarly, I've not seen all the other movies. I've seen Fabelmans, and I can speak about both of them, both ours and Fabelmans. It's not a lament about a bygone era or a nostalgic piece that's meant to sort of wallow in a time that was. It is essentially embracing the future, and specifically with our film as well. I think the whole idea of the repurposement of film and of the projector and also of human beings, of the projectionist, I think that's something that we're seeing quite a bit right now. You're seeing a lot of jobs that earlier were done by humans are now being done by machine, and human beings are being repurposed. So I feel like, I remember when I read the script for the first time, it was one of the big things of the ending that really spoke to me, because it was something that we constantly debate, with the onset of AI and with the onset of, breakthrough technology. What are so many human beings going to do? And in this case, you had someone who was really responsible for keeping hundreds of people entertained every single day as a projectionist, and it was a highly specialized job. It wasn't very well paying, but there was a sense of honor to it, and there was a sense of passion that they would bring towards their job. And then you would see them being repurposed as a vegetable vendor on the street. Something that is not that it's wrong to be that or it's bad to be that, but it probably derived less passion from them. So I feel like, that's why it was an important story to tell. And I feel like similarly, it's, about also embracing what's going to be and, the technology that's going to come. So it's just that bittersweet moment, the cusp that we're at right now as the entire human race. That cusp was important for us to explore in cinematic exploration.
Yeah. Before I open it up to the audience, I want to ask Bhavin, do you want to make more movies now?
Done.
ચાન્સ મળે તો કરવાનું એમ.
If I get a chance, I'll do it.
What kind of movies would you like to make?
હવે કઈ ટાઈપની બનાવી છે? તે મને હમણાં કીધું કારમાં એવી જ બનાવી છે. I know I have the answer, but I won't tell him.
મતલબ
idea હવે.
લવ સ્ટોરી મૂવી.
Love story. He wants to do. By the way, he's been voted for the most
Interesting
bio of a film actor in 2022 by one other famous magazine, where he writes that, okay, I'm Bhavin, because we asked all of them when the press kit was required, so we asked all the child to write their own bio. Said, like, you write, we are not going to write it for you. So he has a really interesting bio. In that, there's a little love story that in my classroom, there's a girl whom I like, but I don't think she likes me. Maybe one day she'll like.
Maybe after this movie comes out.
Or maybe after this movie comes out.
You're a movie star now. I think that gives you a leg up.
बोल रहे कि अभी पिक्चर किया, अभी गर्लफ्रेंड आ जाएगा जो आपको आपकी क्लास वाली.
Well, do we have any questions from the audience? Right here.
At the end of the film, when you're leaving your family, going on the train, Was that like, did that feel connected to you? Does that feel like a real moment for you in your life when you were leaving to do this film?
છેલ્લો જે સીન છે, પહેલાં બધું ઘણું બધું સારું કીધું. છેલ્લો જે સીન છે, તું જાય છે ને રોવે છે એવું બધું, ત્યારે તને એવું લાગ્યું હતું, કેવું લાગ્યું હતું એ સીન કરતી વખતે? અને તું ફિલ્મ શૂટિંગ કરવા આવ્યો ત્યારે પણ તને એવું લાગેલું ફેમિલી છોડીને?
પહેલાં તો જ્યાં પણ જાઉં મિસ કરું, પણ આટલું બધું બી મિસ ના કરું. તો આપણું જેટલું આપણે મિસ કરશું ને એટલું જ આપણું કામ પર ધ્યાન નહીં પડે. આપણે ક્યારે પણ કોઈને મિસ થોડું કરવાનું, પણ આટલું બધું બી મિસ ના કરવાનું. એન્ડ લાસ્ટ સીનમાં મને છે ને પહેલાં તો થોડું થોડું રોવું આવતું હતું. સર ને બધા બોલતા હતા કે રો રો, પણ બધા જ્યારે લાસ્ટ સીન હતો બધા રોતા હતા ને, પૂરું સીન એટલે આખો સેટ રોવા માંડ્યો. હું આ બધાને જોઉં, આ બધા રોવે છે તો મને કેમ ના રોવા આવે, એટલે પછી લાસ્ટમાં મને એમ જ રોવું.
So first part is that yes, he was missing his family, like similar experience when he came to even shoot. But he realized that I have to be strong and learn to focus on my work. And if I miss them, I will not be able to focus. So he said he was able to control his emotion. The last climax when he had to cry, and we didn't want to use any chemical or anything because we knew he could do it. But somehow he said he couldn't do it, the way I wanted it or the director wanted it. So we were insisting, no, you got to do it. No, this looks fake. This is not interesting. And then what we did was that the whole unit started crying, the DP and me, and then he was naturally crying, and then we were shooting. So especially Swapnil, and we had an operator and four of us were, it was a very close space, and we all just said nothing. We started having teary eyes and we were literally moved, and then he was moved.
I was also moved. Very good.
Yeah, back here.
Thank you. It was a very powerful movie.
Thank you.
How much of India right now is similar to what was portrayed in the movie? And not to make it political, is the government trying to put more money into education and teach English and bring the community stuff?
I think the countryside in India is pretty much transforming, but where we film, it's still, there are many more schools now. The highways and the trains, all the transportation, the infrastructure is changing at pretty big speed. And you have, transformation and urbanization coming almost everywhere. Very often it's not very well thought out, unfortunately. It's a rapid urban development which comes at very high cost. Because there's a whole rhythm, like just to tell you story of Bhavin, he even every time we bring him to Mumbai for the show, he just hated the experience. He didn't like the car. He wanted to run back to his village because he always keeps saying to us, to me and Dheer, that I'm the son of soil. I like to go back to nature, and I need to be there. I don't want to live in the city. So I think that's so he comes from a Rabari tribe, camel herder, and and he's very proud of where he comes from. And every time he came, he wanted to even wear his own attire so that his people, when they see the photograph, they will feel proud that Bhavin went to Hollywood but was wearing Rabari dress. That's totally his wish. So I think that's very rare. It's unfortunately it's not there. But in terms of school English, it has come big way now in India, So I mean, you can almost every school, private school, and all the higher institute of higher educations are in English right now. Yeah.
Well, I have a follow-up question. What do you think of Los Angeles?
અહીંયા કેવું લાગે તને હોલિવૂડમાં?
એમ તો બહુ મજા આવે છે, પણ કારમાં મજા ન આવે. બાકી તો બધે મજા ખૂબ જ આવે. ડિઝનીલેન્ડ ગયા હતા, જમ્પિંગ જપાંગ, ટ્રમ્પોલિંગ, પછી પેલું કાર ગોકાર્ટિંગ, એ બધી મસ્ત મસ્ત જગ્યા પર ફર્યા. બહુ મજા.
પણ અહીંયા જિંદગી જ ગાડીમાં છે આખી તો.
ગાડીમાં મજા ના.
What he said would relate to every Los Angeles person. He said, I love the city, but I hate being in the car.
In short, yeah, go-karting, Disneyland, everything, but why car,
Okay.
I think you were.
In the movie, you take all the cellulose and you convert it into bangles and bracelets that are multicolored. And it was almost like a painting almost, the way you filmed it. I'm sure it was intentional, but was it intended to send a message that this also brings color to life? In all of these films, we had a list of all of the directors, the great directors. How did you go about like just selecting those, but also the spoons? I didn't exactly understand if that was just a byproduct of the metal, or did you try to say something special, like about the spoons as you did with the bracelets?
I think for me, it was very clear that I wanted to really end on a happy, colorful note, part of my culture and upbringing. Because, I was talking about many nostalgic elements, celluloid and 35mm and projection room and single screen cinema hall and all that. So it was really important that I sort of finish on a positive note. And this was truly from my memory of what I knew, what happened to the film reel, because in India everything was recycled, and we are a great nation believing in reincarnation of everything. Everything has continuous journey. So I wanted to bring that as well. That finally, when he smiles, we get into some kind of a zone which is not what we have seen so far. But it was a very risky decision, and I literally would say, like, why would I want to put so many names? Am I killing myself? Literally, everyone was initially against the idea, but I said I have to do it because this is my only chance. Because there were so many filmmakers who worked with celluloid, had inspired me, made my life richer in many, many ways. And so it was in a way to pay tribute to them in a very short span. When it comes to selecting names, I mainly try to shortlist every director who was there on earth, literally in every country, who shot on celluloid. And then I just blindfolded myself and started putting hands. I said, okay, this one, that one. And they said, oh, now we have 95% of them were men. There were no women. So I said, okay, I have to look for now Jane Campion, and all the other women director and ultimately it was going to be kind of a cacophony, which ends with a, white light at the end when the leader runs out, that we sort of come back to the light before the credit rolls. So that was intentional. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say, in a way, celebrate color and the light. And Samay, which means time, which we anyway celebrated throughout the film. So somehow this film is so much about the time and light.
Well, I think talking about the ending is probably a good place for us to end. So
Yes.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
A terrific film. And
Thank
for
you, Steve.
coming.